Ukraine's president says Russian forces have completely destroyed the eastern Donbas region and accuses Moscow of senseless bombardments as it intensifies its attacks.
The yeas are 86, the nays are 11, and the bill is passed.
The US Senate approves nearly $40 billion in aid to Ukraine as the UN warns of a global food crisis with millions of tons of grain stuck in Ukraine.
This crop is due to be harvested in just over a month's time, but the farmers here still have no idea where they're going to store it or how they're going to get it out of the country.
Now, the US Senate has approved nearly $40 billion in aid to Ukraine, the largest aid package since Russia invaded. Meanwhile, the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, is warning the world is facing the greatest global food security crisis of our time as more than 20 million tons of grain is piled up in Ukraine because of the war. He's called on Russia to allow ships to leave Black Sea ports, including the key city of Odessa, with food and fertilizer. Our correspondent Caroline Davies has more from Odessa.
Ukraine's wheat helps to feed the world. But while its Black Sea ports remain closed, much of it is beyond the world's reach. Over 3,000 tons of grain fill Yuri's warehouse, but because of the issues transporting it out of the country, no one wants to buy it.
I don't know who in the world to ask for help. We would like to be helped to sell this grain at any price, as long as the people don't go hungry. I think that all Western countries should help us. You need to bang your fist on the table, open the Ukrainian ports, stop the Russian invasion, and take out this grain.
How do you feel knowing that there are many people around the world that would be desperate for this crop?
There's a feeling of despair. I'm talking now with tears in my eyes. It's hard to say.
Yuri's problems are faced by farmers across the country.
This crop is due to be harvested in just over a month's time, but the farmers here still have no idea where they're going to store it or how they're going to get it out of the country.
Some goods can be taken out by road, others by rail, but not in the same quantities that used to be transported by sea. Since Russia began its invasion, ships can't move for fear of being hit, and the sea has also been mined, which could take months to remove. Andrei Stavnitsa is an owner of one of the largest ports in Ukraine.
We have about 80 ships that are basically ghost ships in Ukraine right now. The crews have left them. Some of them are full, some of them are empty. They're in the ports or outside of the ports. They're standing there idle. And for the crews to come back, their shipping companies have to get clearance from insurance companies. And these insurance companies are obviously not happy to allow this to happen because the sea is full of mines.
How long do you think it will be until you can reopen the port again?
We have no idea when we will be able to reopen the port. We are facing a disaster that's going to happen in the next few weeks when the new crop is here and the old crop is not exported.
The UN has warned that unless Russia allows the ports to reopen, there could be mass hunger and famine for years. Russia says sanctions imposed on it would need to be looked at if the world wants to solve the crisis. While many in the West will feel that Russia is holding safe passage through the sea hostage, if no agreement is reached, Ukraine's crop could rot while others starve. Caroline Davis, BBC News, Odessa.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's president says Russian forces have completely destroyed the eastern Donbas region, accusing Moscow of senseless bombardments as the country intensifies its attacks. In another development, the International Committee of the Red Cross says it's registered hundreds of Ukrainian prisoners of war who've left the besieged Azovstal steelworks in the Ukrainian port city of Mariupol. The Russian authorities say that all those who have left will be treated in line with international standards, but there are concerns that some could face prosecution by President Putin's courts. From Moscow, our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg has more.
Tired and wounded, Moscow released these images of Ukrainian fighters leaving the steelworks they'd been defending in Mariupol, giving themselves up to the Russians. Ukraine is hoping for a prisoner swap, but in Russia there are calls to put some of the soldiers on trial for war crimes.
They are killers, they are criminals, but we give them medical care.
But your country invaded Ukraine with
more than 100,000 troops. That's aggression, isn't it?
No, it's not an aggression. It's not an aggression. Don't bully us.
Moscow tries to justify invading Ukraine with a false claim that it's gone in to fight Nazis. A war crimes trial could shore up an unconvincing narrative. The Kremlin wants Russians to believe that in Ukraine their army is battling Nazis and NATO. Europe and America were all plotting a way to attack and destroy the motherland. And there are many here who believe this parallel reality, but not everyone does. Dmitry Skourykin admits that his country, Russia, is the aggressor. He is appalled by the bloodshed and wants his whole town to know it. He's transformed the outside of his shop into a message board with the names of Ukrainian towns Russia's attacked: Kherson, Irpin, Kiev. Peace to Ukraine, it says. He's even turned his roof into the Ukrainian flag.
I thought this would be a good way of getting information out, because for the first few weeks of the war, our people didn't know what was happening. They didn't know that Russia was shelling cities.
Some don't want to know. Traitor has been graffitied on Dmitry's door. And the police have been round. He's been fined for discrediting the army. The front of a shop isn't for expressing opinions, she says. He can say what he thinks, says Anton. I think attacking a neighbouring country is a strange thing to do. And in Russia, protesting can be a dangerous thing to do. But Dmitry is refusing to stay silent. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
The US is sending another $40 billion worth of aid to Ukraine. That's around £32 billion.
The support package is the largest since the war began and is in addition to the $54 billion which has already been donated.
Let's speak to our correspondent in Kiev, James Waterhouse. Very good morning to you, James. Now, these are very significant sums of money. Talk to us about how that news has been received and what in practice they'll mean.
Well, President Zelensky and his politicians and ministers have called for one thing above everything else over the past few weeks: weapons and more weapons. They have been grateful for what's already been sent, but as far as they're concerned, they need to replenish what has been lost. So that includes anti-aircraft missiles, tank missiles, ammunition, as well as continued training for forces. Now, this has been influential so far. The support from the West and what the US has announced this morning, or passed through, shows how committed the West is at the moment in terms of propping up Ukraine in its defence of its own country. President Zelensky has said the US is contributing to restoring peace to Ukraine, Europe and the wider world. But of course the fighting is still happening. He's described the Donbas region in the east, made up of Luhansk and Donetsk, as being completely destroyed, accusing the Russians of mindlessly bombarding it. This is a place where Russian forces are focusing their efforts, but it's also a place where there's already been 8 years of fighting between Russian-backed separatists and Ukrainian troops. So we are continuing to see a concentration of fighting there. Meanwhile, where the Russians do occupy territory in the Kherson region to the south, the installed governor there says he intends to make the region part of Russia in the long term, something that will be so jarring for so many Ukrainians. But officials in this country have warned that this is straight out of the Russian playbook.